In this video, we'll cover our Spring Boot REST API. So what we'll do is we'll create this real-time project. We'll develop a REST API with Spring Boot that'll connect to a database. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and look at the API requirements. And here's the information from the boss. We need to create a REST API for the employee directory. And REST clients should be able to get a list of employees, also get a single employee by ID, add a new employee, perform an update, and also delete an employee. And these are the basic CRUD operations that we'll create with our REST API. Alrighty, so let's kind of break down the different HTTP methods here for our REST API. So we'll use the post method to create a new employee. We'll use the get method to get a list of employees. And we'll also use the get method to read a single employee by employee ID. We'll use put to update an employee. And then, of course, we'll use the delete method to delete an employee by their given employee ID. And that's our basic REST API. Now let's look at the development process for this project. So the first thing we'll do is we'll set up our database dev environment. Then we'll create a Spring Boot project using the Spring Initializr. Next, we'll get a list of employees. Then we'll get a single employee by ID. We'll add a new employee. We'll perform an update and also delete an existing employee. And of course, we'll break this down step by step in the following videos. Now let's take a quick look at our application architecture. So we'll start with an employee REST controller that'll communicate with an employee service, which in turn will talk to an employee DAO to connect to our backend database. In this video, we'll actually set up our database table. So we'll have this file called employee.sql. And so this employee.sql file will basically create a new database table for us called employee. And this table will have 4 fields: ID, first name, last name, and email. Also, this script will actually load the table with sample data, just so we have some employees to work with to get started. So the details on downloading the SQL file are provided in the next section. All right, so let's move in here and download the SQL script. So there's a zip file. The file is attached to the resources section of the video. So just move over there to the resources section, choose the drop-down option, and download the file to your computer. So let's go ahead and swing over to our file system and take a look at that file. So here I'll just move into my downloads folder because that's where my browser will store those files. And there's the zip file that we just downloaded from the web. Let's go ahead and unzip this file so we can access it. So what I want to do is simply copy this folder, and I'm going to move it over to another location. And I'll move into this dev Spring Boot. I'll move into this 04 Spring Boot REST CRUD directory, and I'll paste the file here. It's just a folder, very simple, just has one file, employee.sql. And what we'll do is we'll actually open this file in MySQL Workbench. So I have MySQL Workbench open. I'll go ahead and log into this account here using Spring Student. And then I'll just move up here and I'll just open the SQL script. I'll just move over to that directory, dev Spring Boot. So this is a very basic file here. We basically just create this database called employee directory. And then we move down, we drop a table if it already exists, and we simply create the table employee. And it's a very simple table, right? Just ID, first name, last name, and email. And then for the insert, I just kind of insert some sample data here for 5 employees, just so we can have some data to play with when we start out. Alrighty, so then let's just hit the little gold lightning bolt here on our toolbar, and that should execute the script. And there you go. So on the bottom, you should see green and yellow. That's fine. So we can see our new schema that we just created. And there it is, employee directory. Looks good. And we should just have just one table here called employee. Good. And we can do a real quick query here just to select the data to see what's out there. And there we go. So 5 employees that will start. We have a lot of steps here in our development process, but we'll focus on one task here in this video, and that's creating a Spring Boot project using the Spring Initializr website. Let's move over to our web browser and let's generate the Spring Boot project. So up top here, I'll simply go to start.spring.io. And this will bring us to the Spring Initializr website. Up top, we'll keep all of the basic defaults here for the Maven project. We'll keep Java, and then we'll make use of the latest version of Spring Boot that's there. And then for the group ID, we'll simply give our love to code group ID here. So I'll put in com.lovetocode.springboot. And then for the actual artifact ID, I'll give CRUD demo. And then I'll swing over here for our dependencies. So this is things for our Maven POM file, right? So the one thing we'll need is web, because we're building a RESTful web application here. And then we also need to make use of JPA, because we're doing some database work with Hibernate and ORM, and also JPA a little later. Then we'll add in dev tools to give us that automatic reloading of our application during development. And then finally, this one nice little thing here is that since we're using the MySQL database, we can actually reference the actual MySQL database driver right here in the initializer, and they'll put in the appropriate entry into our POM file. So this is great. So this is basically minimizes the amount of work we have to do inside of our POM file. So I like this. Okay, so down at the bottom here, just make sure you have the appropriate items selected: web, JPA, dev tools, and MySQL. And then just go ahead and generate the project. And then your web browser will download it, and you'll have this file, and we'll actually import this into our IDE. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and close my browser here, and I'll just move over to my file system. I'll move into that downloads directory, and there's my cruddemo.zip that was just created by the Spring Initializr website. I'll go ahead and unzip this file, and then I'll just copy this folder. And you already know the drill, right? I'll just move to my love to code directory, move into my dev Spring Boot, and then I'll just paste the file there. And again, you can paste it anywhere you'd like on your file system. Cool, so that looks good so far. Alrighty, so with the import, we have this new project here, CRUD demo. So this is awesome. So it's imported into our IDE. And right now it's very bare bones, right? That Spring Boot Initializr just gives you this one CRUD demo application.java file to start with. But don't worry, we'll add more code to this project over time. What I'd like to do is look at the pom.xml file just to review what's in here. So we've seen a lot of this work before, right? We're simply using the Spring Boot starter parents. So we can inherit the defaults for like Maven configs and so on. And here we have the actual dependencies that are listed. So we're adding the Spring Boot starter data JPA for Hibernate ORM support. We're putting in Spring Boot starter web for MVC and REST support. Also remember here we have the Spring Boot dev tools for that automatic reloading, and we saw that in some of the previous videos. And then also the nice little bonus here that we have is this idea of the MySQL connector Java. So that's the MySQL JDBC driver that was automatically added by that Spring Boot Initializr website. And also with Spring Boot, they have some built-in support for testing. So that's also in the given Maven POM file.